welcome to Wisconsin weather experts right here on Fox Local. I have Stephanie Barrichello with me this morning. I need to get a little more sunshine, I think, to wake up.
But it's hard to do.
It is, but we are going to have a lot more sunshine in the forecast here locally. Other areas of the United States, quite the opposite view of what we're having.
Yeah, I think this is a topic we're going to talk about a lot in the week ahead, or at least through Thursday, but that's the tropics. Let's get the very latest, because yesterday we were talking about Tropical Storm Imelda. Actually, earlier this morning, it intensified to now a Category 1 hurricane. So we still have those two named storms in the tropics right now. We have Umberto, which is really just out west from Bermuda. That is a Category 1 storm as well, with winds of 80 miles per hour. And of course, Imelda, that is now a Category 1 as well, with 80-mile-per-hour wind. The tracks are on there too, so this is pretty interesting. You can see Umberto is actually going to continue to move northward and then push east. So it is technically going to stay just west and north of Bermuda, but they are already dealing with the outer bands of that storm as we speak. And then Imelda, a little different. That's actually going to continue to push out towards the east and kind of skirt maybe just south of Bermuda, but much, much closer than what Umberto will get. So this is a 1-2 punch for Bermuda, and we're going to go into more detail about Bermuda specifically here coming up. But there you go. Two hurricanes.
Yeah, you know, we're continuing to track it. I guess better out east than by us. But you mentioned the Bahamas were impacted earlier. Now Bermuda's going to be under the gun for both of these. And that is causing some issues for people who live in those zones.
Yeah.
We're going to focus on the Bahamas because authorities in the Bahamas closed most schools on Monday as Imelda dropped heavy rain in the northern Caribbean. That included Cuba as well, where 2 people have died as a result of the storm, unfortunately. Also in Cuba, flooding and landslides have reportedly cut off nearly 17 communities, and more than 18,000 people were evacuated in parts of the region. Definitely not good there because they, need their roads. It's not like they're in a continental U.S. where they have all those roads to travel.
Exactly.
And this is also impacting some people at sea as some cruise lines have to change itineraries and routes, especially from Florida to the Bahamas. One of the cruise ships, Utopia of the Sea, out of Port Canaveral, Florida, will be skipping Nassau and adding an extra day at sea instead. The trip to Coco Cay is also in the Bahamas, is still going to be going on, though.
There you go. That's so popular, a popular destination for a lot of people. So I saw these images. These are courtesy of Fox Weather. And I just had to talk about it because, they plan for this, cruise ships and cruise lines. They plan for this possibility. And, Florida to the Bahamas, it's not that far. And that's exactly where the storm is right now. But, just a fascinating part of, the impacts of these storm systems.
Yeah, and it's good that they move because I have been on a cruise ship in the Caribbean and we didn't even have major storms, but the ships have stabilizers. They're essentially, like wings that go out to help stabilize the ship if there's big waves. And I can't imagine what it would be like to be in one of these storms because I got so seasick just from some of the big waves when I was there. So it is really good that they're taking things with caution and moving those so people stay safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of Bermuda, let's head there right now. This was video from earlier this morning, also courtesy of Fox Weather, as outer bands from Hurricane Umberto arrived. Fox Weather, that is, does have a crew stationed there, so hoping for more video as this storm really gets going. Bermuda will deal with both hurricanes, as we just talked about, within the span of 2 to 3 days. So Umberto is expected to pass to the west and north of the island today, and Imelda could pass even closer on Thursday. You saw those tracks earlier. Now, Umberto will likely weaken as it passes, but could still produce at least tropical storm force winds through tomorrow morning, among other impacts. Then Imelda could pass Thursday as either a Category 1 or Category 2 storm. The latest National Hurricane Center track actually strengthens it to a Category 2. It'll, of course, bring similar impacts. Now, this is interesting. So Bermuda is pretty small, what a target, right? It did actually experience a double whammy back in 2014, too. 2 storms made landfall just 6 days apart. So that would be Hurricane Faye, that was on October 12th, and then there was Hurricane Gonzalo, that was on October 18th. So that was 6 days apart. This will be, again, between today and Thursday, so a little shorter time span. Thankfully, these aren't major hurricanes, but still, you'd have to think everybody on that island, maybe a short span of quiet time, and then they're just dealing with the same thing.
The action's back at it. So we were actually really lucky that Umberto did weaken because, again, being a Cat 5 over the weekend, Cat 4 yesterday, I mean, it could have been a disaster for areas there. So both at a Cat 1, but as you mentioned, Steph, we're going to be watching those tracks heading towards Bermuda through the rest of the week.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead.
Well, there's going to be, as we mentioned, 2 tropical systems in the Atlantic, but could the Fujiwara effect be happening? Chief Meteorologist Tom Walks goes into more of what that is and breaks it down so we can better understand.
Well, have you ever heard of something called the Fujiwara effect before? Let's talk about this. The Fujiwara effect, named after a Japanese meteorologist who ran the Japanese Meteorological Agency back in the 1940s. They've actually been studying this type of phenomenon going back to the 1800s, which is really wild. This is a satellite image from NOAA. This goes back to 2017 and illustrates what the Fujiwara effect is. And it's when you have 2 tropical systems that kind of dance around each other and eventually one absorbs the other one. So it's essentially how one system can influence another and how they sort of meld together or really disrupt their flow. You can see certain cases where, in this case, for example, one system absorbs into the other, so it kind of centers around a common core, if you will. There are other cases where it may spin around each other and then they kind of shoot off in their own directions as well. And in rare cases, you can get them where they come together and form a big monster storm as well. But this goes back to 2017, showing Irwin and Hillary kind of coming together here, dancing around. So one is sort of influencing the other, right? And then it merges into one that ended up weakening here. Well, why am I bringing this up? Well, let's take a look at our exclusive Fox weather model here. We have 2 systems in the Atlantic right now. We have Hurricane Umberto and we have Tropical Storm Imelda. Now, a little bit farther away, I don't know if this is pure Fujiwara effect, but take a look here as we go through time and you can see how Imelda starts making its way out over the ocean instead of coming into the Carolinas. Now, I think there are several different factors at work here, including the upper level wind flow in the southeastern United States, but it's certainly a possibility here that Umberto, which did become a Category 5 hurricane for a time last weekend, could be influencing the track of Imelda and helping to keep it from making landfall in the Carolinas. So I don't know if I would perfectly call this the Fujiwara effect like we saw in that 2017 example, but I do think that certainly Umberto had at least a little bit of a role in the track of Imelda here. Now, I think if they had been a little bit closer together, we would have seen that dance, if you will, that Fujiwara effect that we saw back in 2017 in the Pacific. Again, these are a little bit farther apart, so I think there are a few more factors at play. It's not quite pure Fujiwara effect here, but still interesting nonetheless that you had a super powerful hurricane and then a tropical storm to eventually become a hurricane, Imelda, not too far apart from each other that, well, certainly could be influencing each other in some ways.
It's fascinating.
Really cool. We were just talking about how the imagery we can get from this, and you see that dancing effect, but this is a big impact, especially when you see this occur. So we'll have to watch if those systems do that in the Atlantic through the upcoming days.
Yeah.
Well, a little calmer here locally. We're going to break down our regional weather forecast. Just a little bit. Not too much, right? We are still noticing, yes, the stationary front with those 2 tropical systems off in the Atlantic, while here locally from the south heading into the Great Plains and upper Midwest, we have high pressure in control, which we'll talk about in a little bit, keeping things calm. Where we see some more active weather weather as we are going to focus again in the Pacific Northwest region because that is where we are dealing with an occluded front, another low pressure system in front off in the Pacific, and that is going to continue to stretch into the Pacific Northwest, bringing areas from Portland all the way into Northern California with more rain, and a third low pressure system giving some showers near Salt Lake City. So really it's the West Coast that has been being pummeled with rain showers and storms on and off, continuing to keep things wet and even drive some localized flooding possibly. We are going to watch in portions of Idaho stretching towards Salt Lake City near Utah for maybe another inch of rain. Of course, already ongoing now. Yesterday there was the threat for some additional rain there too, so more on the way is going to cause some issues for potential flooding, but thankfully that risk is on the marginal end, so the lowest end that we could see for that area. In addition to all this series of low pressure systems and fronts out there, it is prompting wind headlines across portions of Washington into Oregon, into portions again of Nevada, California, where we could be tracking, depending on where the location is, 35 to 55 mile per hour winds. So these wind advisories are going to be issued through tonight. Of course, with some spots dealing with lakes out there, we are not wanting boats to go out or drive around, but it's going to be breezy in addition to some of the clouds and showers they're continuing to see. Clouds and showers, though, not looking to be the case here. Locally in Milwaukee, we have blue skies, sunshine. It is another gorgeous looking day out there. And again, that's the continuation of high pressure that is in control. What we're dealing with is a very weak backdoor cold front, not looking to bring us any kind of rain, but it is going to shift our winds and eventually bring us more cooler temperatures as we're heading into the middle of the week. South of that front, we're still building, though, a lot of the heat along the border and south into portions of Iowa, heading into Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, but north of that front towards the UP, that's where we're going to maintain some of those cooler temperatures throughout the day today in the lower 70s. We'll also have some lower 70s along the lakefront as that lake breeze kicks in, again with the warmest air concentrated near Madison and south, likely to hang on to some of the 80s. Temperatures should be again the warmest there through the day today, but while a big portion of Wisconsin sees the 80s today, we are expected to at least have a short cool down, if we want to call it that, by Wednesday. Still going to be above average, but we should see more 70s across the area inland, low 70s near the lakefront. Then our winds start to shift by the end of the week back out of the south, supplying us with the warmth to move in yet again. So many more days ahead of the 80s will be in store. And we possibly on Friday, as Steph's been talking about early this morning, if you're watching the Wake Up Show, could tie or break the record high temperature on Friday. Right now we have a forecast of 85 and that record is at 86, so we'll be watching that. If we are to stretch things out though, because we are heading into the first day of October tomorrow, the first full week of October, it is going to be a really warm weekend here locally, and temperatures across the Great Lakes region could be about 15 to 20 degrees above average. So as we mentioned, we are going to continue to watch the temperatures throughout the week. While 80s are in store for most of it, we're also going to extend things as we head from October 7th through 13th. Still going to have the probability of warmer than average temperatures here locally, but we might see a cool down in the forecast. While that may not be right now per se, we'll have to watch towards the middle of October where some of our long range models are hinting at that. So our exclusive Fox weather model is showing that yes, we may have a little more cloud cover moving in as we head through tonight and into Wednesday, looking to stay dry statewide, even though that front will be with us and moving through. We'll start to see a lot of those clouds depart and more sunshine returning as we head into Thursday. Now through the rest of the week though, we are favored to stay dry. Not too much of a concern there, but it's mainly going to be late Sunday. We could see some slight chances of showers and thunderstorms, looking to really maybe increase some of those chances of rain though as we're heading into next week. So Monday could be Tuesday, Wednesday, just depending on where we see this system move and when it moves in. But we are at least looking to stop some of the extended period of drought that we're tracking for some spots, especially in Michigan, where the whole state is under some of the problems for drought right now. Here locally, though, we don't really have much of that, but with the dry stretch, I'm interested to see what next week's monitor
Yeah.
looks like, because we might add a few areas to more abnormally dry or minor drought conditions.
Yeah, and I could see that in some of our southern communities.
Yes,
so we
absolutely.
get that on Thursday, and we will update you then. Now, the opposite of drought, unfortunately, now we're going to be talking about another area that has dealt with pretty devastating flooding. It's destroyed, unfortunately, parts of Globe and Miami, Arizona. There are two small towns southeast of Phoenix. 3 separate waves of rain, and we're talking monsoonal rains here, brought massive amounts of water to those areas. In the aftermath, hundreds of volunteers, though, have poured into the small towns to help with the cleanup. A reporter from our sister station in Phoenix has the latest.
For miles and miles, streets are lined with trucks, volunteers and cleanup crews pouring in from all over the state of Arizona after the small towns of Globe and Miami were hit with 3 separate waves of storms, bringing catastrophic flooding.
How do you prepare yourself for a 20-foot wide, 8-foot wall of oncoming water full of debris? It's a daunting task. And then where do you put all the debris once you try to clean it up?
The powerful wall of water carried everything in its path. This video from Friday night shows the moments and aftermath. Cars and people carried by the floodwaters.
This is the worst thing they've ever seen. And it came over the wash. I mean, I was in the house when it happened, when this happened. It came over the wash and came in through the back door. And by the time I got downstairs to even look, it was 2.5 feet of water.
As the small towns are overwhelmed by tragedy, they've been met with families and football teams driving in from all over the state to help.
You could see that the water level completely filled the basement and the thing. I mean, it was devastating. And so it's kind of eye-opening for them, like, oh man, this is real destruction.
I want to teach them to serve and to feel that love for other people. We just want everybody to feel loved.
Nothing like a tragedy to bring together a community. Nothing like it. Everybody wants to help. Everybody is watching out for each other.
As volunteers go door to door with their own equipment, putting back together the pieces, business owners are fearful of monsoon storms in the coming years.
Some of the merchants here, nobody's getting rich, and then you add building damage and cleanup. It's really a heartbreaking thing.
And thanks again to reporter at Fox 10 in Phoenix for that story. I just think after what we experienced in August, watching other communities recover, it's just to a whole new level because we now know what they are going through.
Correct. We can relate to it back here at home, and it's sad that it does take a disaster for people to come together, but you know, hopefully it sparks some insight that we just need to come together more often.
There you go. All right, we have quite a bit more coming up on Wisconsin Weather Experts. In fact, we're going back to Alaska. Lisa has more pictures and more environmental stuff to talk about. Stay with us.
back to Wisconsin weather experts. We're going to take you one last time to Alaska, but it's a little bit of a different story of doing stuff. It's more so on the environmental impacts that these big cruise ships have. I mean, have you ever seen these ships like this? This was a ship I was on, and wonder what happens to all of the waste from your garbage, your food? Where does all that go? And how do you get water, right? You're supplying this to thousands of people. Well, I was honored to converse with the environmental officer from the ship, which I was on Holland America. This was Albert Jan Kleinhoff, and his job is to stay in compliance with the environmental rules and laws at port, sea, and on the ship. So he was a very important person when it came to talking about some of the sustainability efforts that they have to take on ship, as well as, again, following all these rules and laws. Now, there were focus areas that the ships had to include, and for this company, they focused on climate action. And a lot of this, again, is they're adapting to it, and there's goals for the upcoming years, but they're adapting to using alternative fuels, and they're testing new low carbon and zero carbon emission technologies to help out with that. They want to have a circular economy, so a closed loop system, kind of like the water cycle. That way they can reduce waste, consume less, and manage the waste on board. They also want to have biodiversity and conservation, so they want to invest in programs and companies that support biodiversity, conservation, and work with supply and chain communities to help to improve their ecosystem. So we're going to get into how this works. You can see me in the picture on the right there. The first step is when you put your garbage in your room. You know, think about it like a hotel room. Normally you take it out, but you have something called stewards, and they go through the garbage and separate it out of your room. We also have waste bins in the room where you can separate paper from general waste. Then what happens is that then gets brought underneath parts of the ship, or again, the lower levels that you normally don't go in, where there's another recycling center where the separation takes place. This is where they'll drop it off, and it'll be sorted again based on things like aluminum, metals, cans, cardboard, and that will go to the proper recycling locations. The third step is they'll take additional pieces of plastic and garbage where they'll have someone actually wash it. So you're not having dirty recycling go somewhere. Those pieces are washed, sorted again, and recycled in the appropriate places. So there's a lot that goes in behind the scenes with a lot of the tools that we're using, again, things we're drinking from. But then what about the food? Because this is a whole nother thing. Unlike us here where we can throw it out and have landfills, they really focus on reducing food waste. The picture on the left, you see some of the servers, they actually cut the food for you. In this case, it was a cake, or they'll serve you the food, so that way your portions are a lot smaller. You can always ask for more if you're hungry, but the food is going to be served to you rather than you piling it on your plate and, of course, wasting more of that food. Now, once you are done with your food, of course, sometimes you're just full or you can't eat it all, or maybe you have waste that is also separated by some of the servers. So we have something called soft waste, which will go into a bin, where organic material that typically decomposes quickly, like vegetable scraps, that will go in that bin. Then they separate the hard waste in the other bin, and that's food that maybe can't decompose as easily, such as bones, seafood shells, egg shells, and such the sorts. They take the hard waste, remember that's going to be something like anything with the shells, and that then gets put into a giant food dehydrator. That's what you see is the metal thing on the left there. And that then again shrinks it, and it is put then into an incinerator, which is the green machine on the right. Once it comes out, kind of like coffee grounds, it can be used as fertilizer. That's if a country allows it. Now, what about the soft waste? We talked about the vegetable scraps and such. That actually is put into this machine here called a biodigester, and it has microorganisms to break down the food, kind of like your stomach has that bile. It turns into a smoothie-like substance called gray water, and it can be discharged into the ocean as long as you're 12 miles offshore. Now, of course, there's regulations made for the sewage discharge into the seas for ships and depending on where you are. In terms of water, believe it or not, they do post signs in your bathrooms and stuff saying water's precious, please conserve it. You can conserve water water by reusing your towels, but the ships actually produce fresh water from seawater through osmosis. They also use waste heat from the engines that preheats the seawater. It is then put into a vacuum flash evaporator where they can boil the water to create steam, which condenses into fresh water. So there's many different ways that these ships are using the environment, following procedures to make it healthier, not only for the people on board, but for the environment as a whole.
Oh, that's very fascinating.
Yeah,
Thank you so
it was
much,
awesome.
Lisa.
Well, we're going to have a lot more coming up after the break, so stay tuned in just a couple minutes.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for staying with us here on another great episode of Wisconsin Weather Experts. Thank you again for all of that Alaska information and just all of it that you've shared over the last couple of weeks. It's been very fascinating. We'll be right here tomorrow at noon. Stay with us.
September, and we have a lot to talk about for you here in this next hour. We're going to check in with my colleague Brett Lemoyne on the story that he's working on for our evening newscast at 6 o'clock. We're also going to talk about the government shutdown that is looming.